Welcome to Wawasan Wire. Today we're talking about Hajiji Noor's assumption of the Sabah chief ministry.
You know, for anyone who is watching this unfold, it really felt less like a political transition and more like a 48-hour thriller.
Absolutely. It was incredibly tense. Just a few days ago, right after the state election, Sabah was basically on a knife's edge. A hung assembly seemed, almost inevitable.
Everyone was asking who would take the helm, but the political maneuvering since then has been, well, decisive, to say the least.
And now we have our answer. It seems Datuk Seri Hajiji Noor, who is the chairman of the Sabah People's Alliance, is set to be sworn in as chief minister tonight.
Which signals a very, very quick end to that leadership vacuum. And that speed is really the main story here, isn't it?
It has to be. We've seen other states get stuck in deadlock for weeks, sometimes months, with all the hearse trading and instability that comes with it.
Exactly. And in Sabah, the magic number for a simple majority was 37 out of the 73 seats. That became the only number that mattered.
So when those preliminary results started coming in, the Sabah People's Alliance, well, they were in a bit of trouble.
A bit of trouble is putting it mildly. Depending on which report you saw, they had secured maybe 29, perhaps 30 seats.
Which still left them a good 7 or 8 seats short of being able to govern on their own.
And, a 7-seat deficit might not sound like a lot, but in this kind of political climate, it's a chasm. It's huge.
It leaves you completely vulnerable, doesn't it? Open to poaching from the other side to counteroffers.
And it brings on immense pressure, especially from federal partners who just want to see stability in the state, no matter the cost.
You really can't overstate the stress that puts on the leadership. It's not just about finding the numbers. It's about finding them securely and finding them fast.
The discussions behind the scenes must have been incredibly intense. We're talking about all the component parties within the Sabah People's Alliance, plus their strategic partners, all in a room hammering this out.
The clock was ticking. The mandate was just get this done before the swearing in or we risk a total collapse.
And what's fascinating is how that pressure just forced everyone's hand. It seems the need for a stable government just overrode everything else.
All the usual political rivalries just sort of melted away.
It seems so. The focus shifted entirely from ideology to simple arithmetic. Can we get to 37? The fact they did it before the swearing in just speaks volumes. They were determined to avoid a mess.
Okay, so to really understand how they pulled it off, we need to look at where those missing seats actually came from. This wasn't just an internal negotiation.
Not at all. This required getting some crucial external players on board, players who suddenly held all the leverage.
Let's unpack that because this is where the real drama was. The first, and maybe most obvious factor, was the independents.
Yes, the 5 newly elected independent assemblymen. For a moment there, they had an immense amount of power.
They were the ultimate kingmakers, weren't they? They hadn't aligned with anyone during the campaign, and then right after the election, they made this very strategic announcement.
A masterstroke, really. They publicly said they would support any party that could form the next government.
Which is such a smart move for an independent. It basically takes all the risk off their shoulders.
Exactly. They weren't tying themselves to a potentially sinking ship. They were just committing to a functioning government, whoever was in charge. It forced both sides to come courting immediately.
But relying only on independence can make for a shaky government down the line. That's why the second piece of this puzzle was so critical and, frankly, a lot more surprising.
You're talking about the support from within Pakatan Harapan.
Specifically, the People's Justice Party. They'd won 2 seats, and they came out almost immediately and declared they'd support the Sabah People's Alliance.
And if you look at the national political landscape, that is a massive statement. It really raises some profound questions.
It does. Why would the People's Justice Party, a key part of the national opposition, throw its support behind a state coalition that's, often aligned with its federal rivals?
I think it really speaks to how unique Sabah politics can be. Sometimes regional stability just trumps whatever's happening at the national level.
So immediate function was the priority.
It had to be. And mathematically, that 2-seat block was the key. It was the piece that unlocked the whole thing. Without them, the Sabah People's Alliance would have been in a much weaker negotiating position.
And once those 2 seats were confirmed, you could just feel the momentum shift, couldn't you? It became unstoppable.
It allowed them to cross that 37-seat threshold with confidence, and it let everyone in Sabah breathe a sigh of relief that they weren't heading for a months-long political deadlock.
So the deal is done. Datuk Seri Hajiji Noor has the support of 37 state assemblymen. It's a lock.
Yep.
But let's look at the actual ingredients here. This isn't just one block anymore. It's a mosaic.
It is, and it's a very complex one built out of necessity. The foundation, of course, is the Sabah People's Alliance itself. They brought 29 seats to the table. That's the anchor.
The non-negotiable base. But it's those other 8 seats that are going to dictate how this government actually works. Let's break those down.
Okay, so the first two, as we said, came from the People's Justice Party. That gets the tally up to 31, a very strategic partnership.
Then you had some of the smaller regional parties stepping in,
Right. You have the Social Democratic Harmony Party. They contributed 1 essential seat.
bringing the count to 32.
Correct. And then the Sabah United Party also came into the fold with 1 seat, so now we're at 33.
So it shows Hajiji's team was casting a really wide net, trying to bring in as many different voices as possible.
They had to. But the final decisive push came from those independents we talked about earlier.
There were 5 of them to start with. How many did they manage to get on board to seal the deal?
They secured 4 of the 5. Only one of those independent candidates decided to remain outside the new coalition.
Wow. 4 out of 5. That's a huge vote of confidence. It shows that these unaligned players are betting that this new administration is going to be stable.
And that's how you get to the final number. You have the 29 from the Core Alliance, plus 2 from the People's Justice Party, 1 from the Social Democratic Harmony Party, 1 from the Sabah United Party, and those 4 independents.
And that gets you to 37. A clear, comfortable mandate to govern.
It's really a textbook example of coalition building, how a bloc that falls just short can quickly bring in these smaller, sometimes surprising partners to solidify power.
It absolutely underscores the drive for political stability in Sabah. They just wanted to minimize that period of uncertainty, which is always so important for public confidence.
But this is where the next chapter begins, and it's the more complex one. The political engineering is done. Now they have to actually govern.
And this coalition is incredibly diverse. You have the Sabah People's Alliance, with its own federal alignments, working side by side with the People's Justice Party, which sits in opposition nationally.
That has to mean some intense compromises on policy, doesn't it? Especially when it comes to things like resource allocation or long-term development plans.
It feels like a coalition that was built for survival, maybe not for seamless policy execution.
Precisely. And that's the big question now. How will all these different affiliations, especially the inclusion of the People's Justice Party, influence the government's direction? Will keeping everyone happy end up diluting Hajiji Noor's core agenda?
Or, to play devil's advocate, could this broad consensus actually be a good thing? Could it force a wider distribution of resources, a more inclusive approach to policy?
That's the billion-dollar question for Sabah right now. Because the People's Justice Party is now inside the tent, they have institutional leverage they never would have had in opposition. How will they use it?
It's going to be fascinating to watch how this team works together. The numbers look stable, but the ideological stability, that's the great unknown.
Absolutely. We'll be watching those first policy announcements very closely to see who seems to have the most influence.
Remember to like and subscribe for more videos like this.